That's what I'm talking about. What's going on, everybody? Welcome, Arvanauts. Welcome, all of you lovely peoples, to a Saturday night stream. It is Saturday night. It's about 7 p.m. Eastern, and we are here for some Masters of the Dungeon goodness with you as we head forward with our Roundtable D&D discussion. This has actually taken a month off. It was a month off in August, and now we are back for the fall of Masters of the Dungeon as we move to episode 21. We almost have 2 years worth full of episodes that we've got for this awesome show that I really have fun doing, and I'll be happy to introduce my co-host with you to you in just a moment. But before I do that, just a couple of reminders about ways to support the stream. If you have not done so already, please follow the channel. Please check out the YouTube with !ARV2, where you can see all the previous broadcasts of this show. !ARV tweets will get you over to my Twitter, where you can follow me and see when I go live and when I talk about other things relating to streaming, gaming, music, family, writing, teaching, and occasionally some politics go thrown in there too. Exclamation point tweet will let you retweet the stream, and please do that. That would be much appreciated. And then you've got all that can be found, by the way, at arvineleron.com, which is the website for this channel. And then you've got the ways to support. Oh, and I believe also exclamation point ARVCord, I didn't mention. That's a way to hang out with the Arvanauts in between streams as well. On the financial side, exclamation point ARV Shop will let you check out the merchandise area for this channel, where we have Adventures in Middle-earth material and also material for Infinity and Beyond, and soon we'll be adding some Esper Genesis material there as well. Exclamation point Arv Treon is the Patreon, currently sitting at $2.92. Would love to see that get north of 300 again, so that we can start adding more things back into the channel as the numbers get higher and it can be financially supported. And then last but certainly not least, of course, that sub button above the video window. We're up to 47 subs now as we're moving back up steadily again. Would love to see that get north of 50 as well. You can use custom emotes, like a lot of the ones that you just saw Aridinel throw out there, plus custom sub badges and all that kind of good stuff. So definitely jump in as far as that's concerned as well. We will be with you for the next hour and a half or so with Masters of the Dungeon, and then I will be switching over to The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD for the rest of the evening. And then I will be back next week on Tuesday with Adventures in Middle-earth as we continue our campaign of Professor Tolkien's amazing world of Middle-earth. One thing I do want to remind everybody about, again, is that is going to be earlier starting than normal. That's going to be starting at 10 a.m. Eastern as opposed to noon Eastern, and that is because we are trying to accommodate one of our players' teaching schedules. So it's going to be starting earlier, 10 a.m. Eastern, and it will run until 1 o'clock. And then I will be over at GOG for my usual Pen and Pixel show, which will be D&D with GOG Storm King's Thunder on Tuesday. And then Tuesday evening, we will have the amazing Our Vocalist return with Apollo Justice Ace Attorney. So that's what we've got going on Tuesday. And then on Thursday, we have got Cat Rambo's next class as part of the Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers on Twitch, and that is going to be a good time. So, with all that said, it is my great pleasure to bring in my co-host for the evening. So I have unmuted myself so she knows that we're ready to go, and then I will unmute her, and then I will move over. Dun, dun, dun. To us, and we are, look at this, I always feel like every time I go on and it's just Dot and myself, like this is some kind of high stakes Hollywood Squares game where I'm just like, she's down the bottom left and then the thing down below. But it is my great pleasure to welcome in Little Red Dot, who is here with us as always as my wonderful co-host and master of ceremonies. How are you, Dot? How is life in the universe and everything in your world? I know you haven't been busy at all, like you haven't been doing anything much lately.
Yeah,
so.
Nothing at all. Yeah, no, it's been good. It's been really, really good. I feel like it's been kind of a whirlwind since Gen Con, actually.
Yeah.
And like I just told you, like we've actually not done this since before. Like the last time we did it was before Gen Con.
Yep.
So many things to talk about, so much new stuff like happening. Yeah, it's crazy.
It is big. It is like going on and like crazy stuff. And I am very excited for it. We do hope that we will have Dave here, the digital DM. He's supposed to be here, but I have not heard from him yet. So I hope that we'll be hearing from him during the course of the evening. But in the meantime, Dot and I will regale you. Although I do have a guest star lined up for next month already. He could not join us this time, but I do have him lined up, and I am very excited. And I will let Dot know about that person later on. So also, I should mention that I'm not going to talk about the details, but there is reason to believe that Dot may have encountered people with whom she will be connected on this channel in short order. And that is a very, very elaborate way to get all of you to sort of look at all of our schedules and go, wait, how did she match up with what person? But you may see more of her on the channel is what I'm saying. I'm just telling you that could possibly occur. So I'm just saying that's the deal with that. Hello, Man Doctor. Welcome in. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate it.
Hi.
Middle-earth Squares trivia game with viewers like that would be awesome. That's a good idea. Ooh. Like oh wow, we could do like a D&D version of that, and we just did very slick. I'll have to think about that, or no, that's interesting. Anyway, but we are here for you for, as I say, the next 90 minutes or so. So I am going to, as always, get into it with what we usually start out, which is by talking a little bit about our campaigns, and we've both been doing quite a bit of them. So I will start with you, Dot. Is there a particular thing you would like to highlight in a campaign that you have been involved with, or have you started a new campaign of something that you're like, this awesome thing happened? What has been going on either as a player or a GM that you'd like to highlight?
Oh my gosh, so many.
I saw Witch Girls a little bit. I know you've been doing that. And so,
yeah, that kicks back up right after Gen Con. That's been a really, it's been interesting. The more I GM, specifically for my channel art, which means I get to do whatever I want to do, which is a really joyous thing,
Yes.
which means if I botch it, I botch it. It's my channel, right? So I've been going out on a limb because I'm running it and Scum and Villainy right now
Mm-hmm.
on my channel. I'm running a Scum and Villainy campaign, and I wrote an original setting for my Scum and Villainy campaign for a very specific reason, which maybe we can talk about later. Who knows? But I've been able to be a lot trickier. Like, I've always been a little bit of a lighthearted GM. You're always assured to laugh. And usually I keep things on the lighter side. And so the first 2 seasons of Witch Girls, I say season and prologue, it was a mini campaign. I kept it pretty light. And at the end of last season, you should watch, if you don't watch any of Witch Girls, just watch the first episode of the second season. I got about 10 or 12 screenshots from the girls of them like grasping their face, gasping, like the looks of like sheer trauma that I'm pretty sure that I accidentally put them through. So in essence, at the end, how do I make this short? The Dark Witch in this lore,
Okay.
who was the youngest of all the first witches, she Akonida, her people, the Highbenders, are looking to raise her, to bring her back. She's been imprisoned for all these years because she's the reasons we have things like vampires, right? She brings the darkness in this lore. So the long and short of it is, they went to go to Akonida's tomb to assure that the Highbenders had not actually done this. And at the end of season 1, everything was right. They saved the Gorgon that was there. They did the thing. They left and went back to school thinking that they had like saved the day. And in the first episode, my plan was not to do this in the first episode. First episode, one of the witches rolled like a 30 to identify whether or not they were in a dreamlike state. And she broke free of the fact that they actually had not done any of those things. When they entered Akonida's tomb, she had put them under like a mental spell. And they had been for the last 6 months under like a shared dream sequence.
Wow.
And the look, I can't decide if they were really mad at me. Like, there was a part of them, I think, they were really mad at me. And then everybody else was.
So this is basically Star Trek Discovery.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it wasn't my plan to do it that way. It just happened. Like, I got to planning season 2, and I was like, I really want to do something to quake their boots and like to make them think they had done everything right. So they have been literally out of the game for 6 months. And when they wake up, the witch world is at war.
Oh, neat.
And so everything's just like a disaster. And they're like trying to figure out how to come back from like 6 months. The school that they once knew it is all shut down. Witch hunters are running rapid. Vampires are walking at night. Like, I took a campaign that was like, girls go to school, and turned it into like witches go to World War II. So
now the time has come.
yeah.
Well, it's interesting because it's almost like, I mean, that is essentially late stage Harry Potter, right? I mean, like if you take the opening of it, and yes, there are moments of darkness in the first couple of books, but honestly, you know, by the time we get to the end, Deathly Hallows and all that, it's a very, very a highly darkened universe just by the nature of the plot. So wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know. I guess all of that to be said, I've also done some sneaky things in the upcoming Scum Ability. So I'm really proud of myself because I'm trying harder to go deeper, right? Like take that plot deeper,
right.
And to grow as a GM. So that's been one of my trials. I was like, can I do it without them figuring it out? I mean, they figured it out the first episode, which was not the plan, but it shocked them the way that I hoped it would. And I'm hoping when they find out the thing in Scum and Villainy, it will be the same.
Oh, wow. That's cool. I don't suppose there's like a crossover where like in Scum and Villainy, they wake up and it's all like really lighthearted. You're just kind of
they wake up and everybody's like an anime.
What is going on with this nonsense? Yeah. She plays against type all the time. No, that's cool. Yeah, that deep dive idea I think is interesting. Also, hi, West River Rat. Water over the roadway. Good God. Well, I'm glad you made it. I mean, you are West River Rat, though. I do feel constrained to point out that as a river rat, you should have been fine with I-90 having water. But no, seriously, I'm glad you're okay. And thanks for the host, Atobo. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that actually, because I've been thinking quite a bit about this, but in reverse, which is the sort of darkness of it with Curse of Strahd. Because in my Curse of Strahd campaign, and this really came home to me the last session we ran, which would have been this previous Saturday, would have been last week. And they've come to this village, the village of Kresk, where there's this crazy stuff going on with hybrid beast creatures and like with just a lot of stuff, not to mention the own darknesses of the characters that continues to kind of interweave with all of this. And there is this sequence where the burgomaster of the village, his son who had died, leaving he and his wife without a child, which had sort of cast this paw all over the I can speak Paul over the village. He's given the offer by the abbot to resurrect his son, and the party immediately was like, "This is not going to end well. Like nothing of this is good," you know. And they go into this creepy hospital, basically, which is in the abbey, where they find that the child has been resurrected, sort of. I mean, it's their kid, but he's not acting the way you would expect, and it's just very. And it struck me as I was going through it, there was a part where I could tell that everybody was just really kind of like even chatted, quieted down, and they're all, and it was because, and I was struggling a little bit with it emotionally because I'm like, I have two children that are the light of my life, and the thought of, you know, anything happening to my kids or what would I do if I was put in that situation is very difficult to deal with. And so I bring it up because I think that Strahd is beautifully, beautifully constructed to create this feeling of exactly what it is, which is almost this drumbeat of horror. I think that horror can potentially be overcome, but this is very much a mature campaign. This is, I mean, I heard that I guess Liam O'Brien from Critical Role has been running Curse of Strahd for his kids. I don't know what he's doing to make it viable, but I mean, the stuff that's in Strahd is really, really intense. So I bring that up only because in my case, I've had to challenge myself to go much darker than I normally would, and to do so in a way that is not, I hope, I mean, I've spoken to folks outside of games, so I don't think this is anything that is hitting triggers that it shouldn't be. But, you know, I've had to be sort of make it clear to everyone around it that this is a grown-up game, and it's a tough, intense game, and I don't think it's gratuitous, but it's very sort of, we're dealing with a lot of very difficult psychological themes, and that has been something new for me. And I think I would have been afraid that I was going to foul it up or get it wrong, or that someone was going to get upset in a way that, or something some years ago. And my own journey through, you know, work and therapy and, you know, everything else and becoming older myself has kind of put me in a position where I think it's okay to GM stuff like that. But I just struck me the other day, like, this is really a challenge, I think, for me and my players in a way that isn't just mechanical and do we survive, but what is the nature of the game that we're playing and the questions that it asks of us. So in a way, it's a deep dive also for me, but it's very much this intense thing that's darker than I normally would go. So it's been interesting. There was a lot of empathy in that moment. Yeah, you're right, Coven Guy. There was. It was a very poignant moment that I think everybody got, and that's also I love those players. So I mean that also really helps too. That I'm blessed to have really wonderful players. But yeah, it's intense, and so it was interesting to me to kind of feel that going on. So that was the cool thing that happened in my campaign, so to speak.
Okay.
But it leads me to a topic, though, that actually somebody brought up that I think will tie in well. And I actually want to bring this back to you, Dot, because you were talking about the idea of taking a setting like Scum and Villainy, but building your own world for it.
Sure.
And a question came up in chat from Amon Doctor about using RPGs, video games to TTRPGs that you can incorporate into one of your games. And so it struck me. I'm curious if we could talk a little bit about the idea of modifying existing settings, combining existing settings, or vastly altering existing settings into essentially a homebrew published setting hybrid, if you follow what I mean.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what a lot of us do. I don't think it's all just complete homebrew or complete, I just run it by the book. I feel like everyone does some version of this, but I'm curious, do you want to talk a little bit about what it's been like for you doing the Scum and Villainy homebrew setting-ish type of thing, and how you use the published material to supplement, or your own material to supplement what you got in the published stuff?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first things first, I mean, I think that video games, one of the reasons tabletop RPGs have started building like sandboxes is because they all realize that people love sandbox RPGs.
Yep.
We love them. We love them. And so tabletop RPGs started, many of them started writing that way.
Yep.
And then you've also got, depending on what you want, I get really inspired by movies and TV that I watch, which is why I've done like Fate of the Anchorman, and which I've talked about before, and the Appliance Wars. But I used what is actually an open, just a framework RPG, like Fate. I use Fate Core.
Yep.
But a lot of people use Cypher, right? Cypher is meant for that as well. And there's a ton of other ones, right? Apocalypse World, and
Yep.
like just you name it. There's tons of them. So those are always fine. I think, if you're really inspired by a setting as a GM, that is all that matters. So let me just say that.
Okay.
So in terms of the Scum and Villainy campaign, so I read Scum and Villainy a while back, and one of the things that I was really interested in when I ran my first sci-fi tabletop RPG, this is the first one I've run ever, was I really did not want the standard. I did not want the standard setup of like intergalactic travel. You're a bunch of rogues in space, and there's the Empire. Everyone is set up that way, where you have this like overarching empire that everybody hates, and you play the rebels. I wanted to wipe that. I did not want that. So I decided, what if mercenary work, stuff that's always considered illegal and against the Empire, which I use in a general, the man, right, in general term. What if it's regulated and approved? What if you get to do what you want to do under this empire, and the empire's actually making things better? What if they're not the bad guy? What if they're not enslaving people? What if actually their presence is necessary, because without them, this galaxy this solar system that I created is basically Outlander. It's people raiding planets and colonies. They were running amok, and when structure was added, it saved people. It allowed people to cultivate. It allowed races to mingle. It allowed for less slaughter and prosperity to happen. So what if it was just different, and you had to work for this governmental entity that basically has a super secret society called the Purloin Guild, who has a code, and the code says, we don't rape, pillage, and kill for no reason. You do your job, you stick to your contract, and you have a right to kill anybody who's doing a contract outside of the presidential scope. And it changed everything. It changed everything for my campaign. So I use a lot of what Scum and Villainy has, right? Like if I need a quick, Scum and Villainy is a great book. It's got a lot of prompts at the back. It's got a lot of planetary and solar system stuff that you can pull from.
Yep.
So some of that I created on my own, and then some of it I pull from Scum and Villainy. Of course, the players, like when you populate sheets, it populates random, especially in Roll20, it's really great. It populates random people for them to interact with. I just use what it gives, right? So like the easy stuff, but the structure is what I wanted to be different. The core of the actual world at which we exist in. And that's when I wanted something different. I don't always choose something different. If I feel like it's going to be a 180, I might as well just write it myself, right? Go find an open system like Fate and make it be what you want it to be. But Scum and Villainy is a really great system. And it still had the mercenary style, like rogue work framework that I wanted, but really I just needed a different setting.
Yeah, that's interesting, because one of the things that, it reminds me a little bit in first of all, the empire you're describing reminds me of Rome, which for all of its faults was a force that brought a lot of civilizing aspects, by which I mean at the time modern medicine, actual toilets and plumbing, and things that people don't,
city planning,
roads and education, and a whole bunch of other things, in addition to all of the other problems, of which Rome had many. But yeah, that is interesting, the idea of thinking about that. But the other thing I was thinking about when you were talking was, there is this sense, I think, that with a lot of the setups always do seem to be wait for the big bad to emerge and then deal with that. And so some adventures, I think, lean into that. We were talking about Curse of Strahd, where Strahd is very much front and center all the time. There is no shadowy cabal. There is a conspiracy of many things, but Strahd is always like, I'm here. Like, he meets the party constantly and is always like, I'm more powerful than you. And, that's just the nature of it. But there are other adventures that move directly against it, which it sounds like is the one that you're doing. In Esper Genesis, the sort of that for me, it was the opening event, which is these people on this prison ship that ends up being attacked, and then they end up escaping, so that they are then on the run from the people that had them imprisoned to begin with, and then a whole bunch of other crap happens, basically. That's the opening of Esper Genesis. So it means that there is not one shadowy empire figure. There is a kind of prevailing thematic concern, in addition to their own characters' backstories, that they begin to develop over time. And the interesting thing for me has been watching how what that ends up doing is making them decide that now they want to fight against this force as they discover more aspects of it, not because they need to do this to save the universe, because the universe will probably be fine either way, but because this would cause their friends, the people they care about, and the ones that they've met
Yep.
at the various space stations and so forth to be harmed, and that to them becomes the stake. And I
Mm.
think the interesting thing about you're doing it in the way that you're describing is you've created stakes which become significant for the players without having to think to yourself, the only way that they will care is if I give them these very single-minded, one type only stake, which is we have to worry about the big bad guy invading or doing whatever. Instead, you create other stakes for them to care about and engage with their characters. And I think that's very interesting to me. And do you think in the process, did your players come in thinking scum and villainy means we're going to get to be Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon?
Yes.
Like, did you
Yes.
have to work with that against it? Like,
Mhm.
how did you?
A lot, actually. We had to have, so I always hold a session 0. That's, you guys know
Sure.
how I feel about that. But
Yep.
we had to, after actually, so we did just like Witch Girls, we did a prologue, we did 4 mini campaign, and then decided that we wanted to launch a full campaign. And actually, by the second episode, we were having some issues within the cast about how things were played. One of the players made a really bold move very early on and shot a general in the face.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
on a military ship. He thought he was conspiring. He did it as the scoundrel, believing that he was threatening them or they were going to be in trouble. They were checking in, and they had brought a hard drive they had recovered that had some very valuable information, and it got basically put into the mainframe, and it corrupted the military mainframe. And he shot him thinking that he had done something. It was a misunderstanding entirely. Let me just put it like that, okay? It's a misunderstanding. He drew first, he shot first, he killed him like instantly.
Okay. Did you expect, before you go on, did you expect that?
No,
Okay.
Not at all.
Okay.
This was supposed to be a main character. It was tied to another character's backstory.
Okay.
Like shot him, killed him, was done. This was
All right.
first
This is
episode.
one of those no plot survives contact with players,
Yep.
people.
No,
Just letting you
and
know.
it destroyed it. And so we had to have a conversation because they were having very this character Janice was having this idea that all of them were criminals because they worked for the Purloin Code. And I was like, I don't think you understand. You're not criminals because you work for the Purloin Code. You have to work within a code of ethics. That's part of why they allow you to do the work that you do.
Right.
And most people that come to the Purloin Guild secretly are not bad people. They're not criminals. They come here because they want to do good. These are the peoples that go to dangerous places and get medicine and deliver it to colonies. These are the people that are doing the work that the military can't get involved in.
Right.
Right. They're doing the right work for the right reasons as issued by the government.
Right.
And that they had that moment of like, and I realized that maybe I had not communicated that well enough in the session 0, because after that, it changed the way that they played it. They did expect coming in that they were basically, this was Rogue One.
Right.
And we were going to do a heist game. And so far, it's actually not been about a heist. One of the things I did was I made our first episode the end of the heist they had just completed.
Okay.
So they had to write the story of the heist, and they ended up leaving the planet being bombarded by raiders and floating in space. They're dead. Floating in space is where we started the first episode.
Always a
And so
good
they were
starting place for space.
right. Just floating in space. So it was so it was interesting. So it took them a while to come to terms with it, and they still have a lot of questions, right? Like last episode they have crash landed on a planet, one of the only like oxygen based planets where most of the humans that came to this galaxy about 1,000 years ago live. It's 85% water. It has 2 main islands on it, and in essence this place is used for agricultural purposes. The humans grow all of the food for this galaxy on this one planet in these floating like farms that float on top of the water. And it's these fields of floating farms on this planet. They got here and they met all these humans, and they're definitely heavily like military regulated. Everybody wears the same like clothing and those kind of things. And immediately for them, like, we want to help you. And the woman's like, help us with what? This is our life. Like we're our life is wonderful. We eat, we have shelter. We're heavily populated. Everybody's healthy. And they're like, but we want to help you. And it's like, just because they work for the government doesn't mean that they need help. It's not that they are enslaved.
Right.
These people can come and go as they want, but the government ensures stability. And so they're struggling with this concept of the government, which is really, really cool in this. Like I call it the government, but basically the ruling entity. And there is a presidential figure that they're beginning to figure out is not really, I think, what it's supposed to be. That's where the trouble's going to come.
Okay.
And the president is basically a front, and the government's fake. There's your spoilers. And they're going to find it out, and then they're going to have this existential crisis. But that's what it's building to. But I think it's really interesting because the formula says You show up on a planet and it's got a colony on it that's working farm for the government. Well, they're enslaved people.
Right.
Well, these aren't enslaved people.
Right.
These are happy humans living on an oxygen, just like one of the healthiest planets in the galaxy. Pure oxygen, lots of food, healthy culture, a safe place. Like, and they're just having a little bit of a shell shock because they're having to cope with the idea that the man may not be bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
May not be bad.
Yeah.
Right?
And then you'll find out, haha.
Haha, right. Just kidding. Yeah.
just as they've just started to, maybe I can believe in structures. Oh, God damn it. No, I mean, that's really interesting. And I think one of the things you're talking about there too is playing with expectation.
Yes.
And we've talked about that on this show before, about sort of playing with player expectation and figuring out a way to take what they're coming from, expecting from a particular group, and then moving in a different direction. So, the thing that's notable about that, though, is that they had enough trust in you as the GM that they could kind of roll with it, because there is otherwise a risk that if they come in expecting that they get to be, villainous rogues, and you're like, well, you're really more like the Three Musketeers, you're really more people that are technically working outside the bounds of the law because you do what the law can't do or whatever.
Correct.
That's a whole, that's a whole different kind of environment. I'm curious, but when you had that session, when you had that chat afterwards, and you don't have to confess private confidences, but I'm curious if did you get a lot of pushback, or was it very much like, so yeah, here's the way that the thing actually works? I'm curious how they felt.
Yeah, no, it was definitely more, it was a clarification. And I think it was interesting too, because it was the first time as a GM I had to deal with a little bit of player hostility, like true, like you killed somebody for my backstory kind of a thing. And I was like, okay, well, we got to have a chat about that. Right. And we dealt with that. But there was, it was about understanding where each person's like character was coming from. So when I explained to them the world, they were like, oh, okay, so we just need to recognize this. But it actually inspired them to talk more about how their characters fit into that world, right? Mm-hmm. So Janice assumed they were all criminals when both the pilot and his sister, who's the captain, they come from a nowhere colony. They're not criminals. They've literally never done a criminal thing in their life. Mm-hmm. They got roped in out of the military straight into the Purloin Guild. Mm-hmm. And when that player realized that, he had to, you know what I mean? It was really interesting. So it actually became more of a deep dive for them to figure out their place in our world.
Yeah, interesting.
To recognize that. I also flipped the series of events when he shot the general. Because the general was trying to keep them safe because he had a personal connection to one of the players. He turned off the security feed, and the security feed came back on just in time for him to put the drive in. So the security feed shows him, the bad colonel, putting a hard drive in, corrupting everything on the military ship, and then Janice shooting him. So they think they're heroes. Mm. They think they did the right thing by killing this colonel who did a thing. So that's all over the galaxy. They're considered heroes. Their faces are all over the place. That's the other thing. I was like, you're not going to get to be secret. I was like, you guys made a bold choice and a bold move, and they have misinterpreted it as the fact that you killed the guy who corrupted the military database, when in actuality, the four of you brought that corrupt hard drive onto the space station. Yeah. And so that also is really eating at them, because the good character's like, we have to tell somebody that this is all wrong. And then you've got Janice, the scoundrel, that's like, the one who actually is like, we're riding this out. I'm a hero, right? I get free drinks. I get the ladies. So that's also been interesting too, is to like take something that I didn't expect and then turn it around and make it unexpected once again for the players.
One of the things that I want to highlight about what Dot just talked about there too is, and I speak about this all the time in the importance of world building properly, is if your themes that you are building up are solid, if you know what the themes are that underpin your world, then regardless of what curveballs your players throw at you, you will never be that thrown off, because the themes will always kind of bring you back to the center of the foundation, right, of the game that you're trying to run. So in this particular case, the ground zero really of what Dot was constructing was a world in which maybe the governments aren't as bad as people assume, where these people are working outside the bounds of the law, but still theoretically beholden by choice in a way to people within the law. And all of that creates a different kind of an impact in terms of the way that people imagine it. So that works because the thematic consistency was there. If this were kind of a slapdash, I throw this together and let's just get a bunch of people on the Millennium Falcon, and then that happens, then who the hell knows what happens? I mean, you probably can roll with it, but it becomes a much more disjointed, kind of disconnected effect than if you do something like this, where thematically you're able to sort of come back to the center of what you wanted to present. And, and you made that clear. Like, your answer was not, oh my God, sorry, let's change the game around entirely. It was, okay, so here's what the values are of the game that I'm running. And that is important. I mean, it's not, you're not forcing it. You're just sort of saying, these are the rules of the world. Like, this is the deal. And people, I think, will very often come to that if they feel like they understand what the parameters of the world are, and if they're not doing violence to their own personal ethical standards.
Correct.
If you were creating a world that was extraordinarily unpleasant, where rape and pillage was the order of the day, there would be a lot of people who'd be like, yeah, I'm not playing in that world. And that's,
Right.
but this is not that. So I think it's interesting that you stuck to your guns, so to speak, in providing it, but it was because you had those themes solidly locked down. The main themes, the central themes.
Yeah, the central thing. Yeah, and I'll tell you, I did a lot of planning. I did not plan to do that much planning, but I did a lot of planning for this campaign because I was building an entire solar system, like the Byzanti Capuli system, which is what I've named it. I have planets, they have moons, there are space stations. Like, if I wanted my players to feel like they lived in this solar system the way that I wanted it to, I have to provide them with that information. And I created a chart. It's like, this planet has these moons, these solar systems, and then I have these space stations. Then I have a space station chart to go along with it. That's like, this space station functions as, this space station functions as.
Okay.
And I don't have to give like landmass details and stuff about every planet, but what I'm trying to do is, if they're role playing, I want them to be like, oh, well, maybe we should head to scroll space station, blah blah blah. I don't have to feed them that. It gives my players a level of autonomy and comfortability over the material, where they can actually live in that world. So I did quite a lot of planning, and I have a lot of history, because they also all chose to play humans, which I thought was really interesting, because they didn't have to. This entire solar system was originally not populated by humans in any way. They came here. So I wrote this whole human history about 1,000 years ago when the humans came to this and blah, blah.
Okay.
But like, they not all of them chose to play human. And so there's also this great opportunity for them to learn the true history of like humans coming here and what it meant for them to like merge with all of these new cultures. And they got separated from the larger like human body of ships. Mm-hmm. So this was actually like, what ended up coming to this system was the prison ship. The prison and workforce ship got stranded here. Basically got separated in their travels 1,000 years ago, looking for a new place to call Earth.
Okay.
And that's the idea. They got separated. So this one, the prison ship made it here. The archival ships, so you're looking at the arks and things like that had bacteria, viruses, animals, books and lore and those kind of things, and one housing vessel. So you got this weird, interesting mix of like human life that ends up coming to this solar system. And now 1,000 years later, it's a very skewed version of itself. Which is kind of interesting too. So they're about to learn a lot about like the human history in this place.
Sounds like a very rich world.
But you're right. In short, you have to plan. Like, if I didn't have what I wanted out of it before I gave it to the players, they would not be able to live in it so richly.
Right. You've always got to know more. It's the same thing I talk about all the time with writing. You have to know more than you will ever show on the surface, right? Because that gives it this sense of organic life to it. Even if they don't visit, sixth planet from the fourth solar system of whatever,
Mm-hmm. It needs to be there for them, because then they feel very comfortable living in it, which I think is really the key.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I pulled up the map to look at this, and by the way, I will come back to that question. Please ask me that question, Coven. I am very happy to answer it during the question portion of this, because boy, do I'll be happy to answer that for sure. There is a planet in the Silrain Arc where most of Espergenesis takes place called Loren Ja. And they had been trying to decide whether they wanted to. They were in this ship that was half broken down. Again, the classic almost floating in space type of thing. And it probably had enough fuel to get them to this base, which looked this moon, which looked kind of sketchy, or to go to this place that had a lot of civilization called Loren Ja. So as I'm in an unusual position, this is a sponsored campaign, and I am in the unusual position of running. I'm honored to be running the Pioneer campaign, the public Pioneer campaign mentioned in the book of Esper Genesis. So that's great, right? But what it means is that there have been times, especially early on, where I was just barely keeping, or they, I should say, were just barely keeping ahead of the adventures that I was running. So they were kind of like, all right, here's this world. So it's like running along and, you know, you're running over this chasm and these bridge pieces keep coming up just as you get to them, like as you're running along. I've never had that experience. And so originally they were thinking about it, and thank God it was the end of a session when they were like, okay, we think we're going to go to Loren Jaw. And I couldn't, there was no details about that planet yet. And I'm like, so I wrote the folks at Alligator Alley Entertainment that do this. And I was like, so this Loren Jaw thing, what about this? And so I got this email back saying, so Loren Jaw is the home planet of the Lorendi Imperium. The Lorendi Imperium are the ones who own the prison ship that your player started from. So this is basically like Luke, after he's been revealed as a Jedi, going back to the Death Star and being like, yo, I'd like to just say hi. I'm like, yes. So I made clear, based upon, I forget how we ended up finessing it. Something along the lines of that they had gotten computer access or something. And they were like, wait, this is what? And then they ended up not landing on Loren Jaw. If they had landed there, it would have been a very different kind of adventure. Like, get ready for a hell a lot of stealth and all this stuff, but I didn't know. And that was a case where I don't have carte blanche to do what I want. If it were just my planet, I could have rewritten it, whatever, or I would have known from the beginning, but I didn't because it wasn't totally mine. And so I had to kind of go, whoa, take a right. But again, the thing that held it together was the thematic consistency of the world, the fact that they've been drawn together by friendship. They have all these parts of backstory, but they've learned aspects of themselves and each other. And so that holds it together. But man, it was just one of those things where I'm like, yeah, that's not going to be the place you're going to want to go, I don't think. So yes, awareness of the surroundings becomes important. But yeah, that's neat though. I like that idea. And Scum and Villainy has actually been popping up quite a bit. I have played a couple of sessions of it myself on my podcast Speculate.
Oh, nice.
And you may, there may or may not be some Scum and Villainy type stuff that may appear again on a certain channel that I know of in the not too distant future. So that could happen. But anyway, yeah, so it's a neat sort of system to work with. But I think what really worked here is that you were able to put those together. Also, I'm going to guess that I know the answer to this, but I'm just to be curious, because I'm curious. I assume that if when you were first starting, you would not have felt comfortable tying the system with the world that you built together, right? Or is that not true?
I mean, it's hard. That's so hard because like I didn't start in Scum and Villainy, right? Like I started in D&D where we all start, and I think with D&D it is a lot easier to oftentimes come out of not start with a module.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I just think it is. It's easier as a GM just to read the GM's guide or the majority of it, flip through a few modules, get the ideas you want, and build your own thing. Because I think it's D&D. Would I have wanted to do Scum and Villainy straight out as a fresh GM? I don't think so. Yeah. I genuinely don't. I mean, I guess the other big thing is like, what difference does it make as long as you're having fun, right? Like you want to be genuine to the system. Sure. But I'll be honest, Scum and Villainy is one of the denser rule systems I've used in a long, long time.
Yeah, it feels like that to me, just as a player looking at what the GM is dealing with, and I haven't GM'd it, and I'm just kind of like, whoa.
You're dealing with a lot of content, a lot of information, because the way that you are facilitating the telling of the story is really based on situational. Every time they roll, it's situational. Like, is this a risky situation? Is this a controlled situation? Is this a risky, controlled, desperate situation? Mm-hmm. So you're like, you got to look at that. And then the next question is, okay, based on what the player is trying to do, if they do it, is the outcome great? You have to almost preempt these pieces, and it can be a lot on the GM because it is a dice pool system, and I find that VTM is very similar in that. You as the GM have to say, okay, roll this plus this. Don't forget this, this, and this. Oh, you frenzied. Now you've got to. So it's a lot of steps for the GM in terms of the facilitation side of things.
Although it seems to me that my sense of it is that is true, but my sense it is that there's a lot more sort of subjective judgment calls that are happening in this game, Scum and Villainy, as opposed to a game like, let's say, Shadowrun, where there's just a lot of mechanical additions. Yes. So there's a lot of mechanical rules. It's not so much mechanical rules as much in Scum and Villainy as it is lots of judgment calls about this
Yes.
plus this equals this, right?
Yes,
Like, is that
yes,
fair
yes.
to say?
It's almost like yeah, it doesn't have a lot to do with mechanics. Like actually the skill set of mechanics, like I want to shoot somebody. One of the great things about scum ability is if you want to do something, it pretty much happens. It's
Right.
about the negating of something
Right,
happening.
right,
So
right, right. Yeah.
it's always about outcome, and how and what the outcome kind of looks like. And I will say that it's nice. It gives an opportunity because like I as a GM don't call rolls. What I love about scum and villainy is my players have to tell me they want to roll.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do a thing and I want to use this to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have to tell me how that happens. That's so nice versus where D&D where I feel like I'm always like, okay, roll a perception.
Yep.
Do a thing,
Yep.
right? I'm always prompting it. So yes, it's a lot of work in terms of once your players want to roll, but it's kind of refreshing to give that autonomy to your players to decide when they want to roll,
Yeah,
when they need to roll.
It's a lot more refereeing and assessment on your part as opposed to setting up conditions for them, right?
Correct.
It's much more,
Correct.
you're assessing their condition, like whatever they tried, you're assessing the result more than it is anything else. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that a lot of the new systems over the last 10 years, I would say, have done, or newer systems, is to kind of move towards decentering everything off of the GM onto the players and having the players call a lot more of the shots, which has not really taken more of the burden off the GM exactly. It's just changed the focus of the game.
Yeah,
but it doesn't mean
the
that the GM
dynamic's
is not
different.
heavily involved in it still, because
Yes.
yeah.
Yep. I totally agree. There are a lot of things I love about Scum and Villainy. I could tell you, like, I think the time clock piece is really interesting. And that's something that I think a lot of GMs are like, oh, how do I make my players live in the moment? You put a clock.
Yep.
You put a clock on the screen, right? And so when you start doing heist and stuff, a clock is everything in a heist game. And so I think that that's something that's really, it's just really unique. And I quite like it for Scum and Villainy.
Yeah, it's neat. I that's interesting. Well, I am going to, and this, but this campaign you're doing is for the podcast, not your
No,
channel,
this is on my channel.
It's on
you
your
can
channel?
check this out on Wednesdays. Yeah,
Okay, I don't know why. That's why, because I'm always doing stuff on Wednesdays. I'm gonna have to go back and check it though, because I want to see that.
Yeah, the prologue, everything's already up on YouTube. I mean, the prologue's out. That's the little 4-part that got them started. So the prologue's out. You can watch that, and then we're only 2 episodes into the new campaign.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Then I'm gonna have to check that out. That is neat stuff. And Aridin, I'll put that link for Generation of Planetary Systems.
Yeah, just check that out. That's pretty cool. It's really in depth.
There's a lot going on.
Really in depth.
Speaking of that, by the way, let me just say, this is slightly jumping ahead of the show notes, but I wanted to mention, I've talked about this before on, I think it was Curse of Strahd, that Saad, who everybody knows as being this awesome dude who plays in both in Hearts of Wulin, Emberwind, and plays in Curse of Strahd. So he pretty much is like, he's like the man, and he does a lot of these system production stuff for me too. So he was kind enough to get me, completely against my will, by the way, because I tried to demand that I pay for it, and he countered my demand with his own demand that I shut up. And he paid for a lifetime subscription to Project Deos, which is, I don't know if you know Dungeon Fog, but so Dungeon Fog is this amazing mapping system. So Project Deos is a Kickstarter that just finished, and it's going to be delivered, I think, early next year. They funded at some ungodly number, hundreds of thousands of dollars, for this software, which will allow you to do fantasy mapping, world mapping, space mapping, steampunk mapping, from the macro level of planetary systems all the way down to the micro level of the dungeons from which they began, which was Dungeon Fog was the first element of this long time ago. It's crazy ambitious, and it's very impressive looking, and even the sort of alpha versions that they've been showing people are really, really cool. And they also have a desktop app for it now and whatever. So the thing that's neat about that is the fact that it will be good for precisely this reason. It'll be good to be able to pull together this idea of sort of building kind of a thematic consistency about the world, building that first and being able to do so in a general way so that you have an understanding of the themes. Because that's the other thing too, sometimes you have a very strong sense, as you did, like, I want to do a space thing. I want it to be space opera, but I don't want it to be us versus the bad guys. Like, I don't want to do that. But I would say there have been other cases where you want to play within a given setting, but you're not really sure exactly. This is a way in the building of the world to figure out what is thematically important, right, about a given world, what thematically matters to you. And so having a program like this, like a mapping program like this, can really help with something like that because it helps to visualize it. I mean, and I'll admit that I'm a geek for maps anyway. Like, I love maps, and so I'm not, I don't think I'm particularly amazing at putting them together, but I love looking at them. I've ever since I was a kid, anytime I got a map at the front of a fantasy book, I would study the map for a long time because I'm like, I wonder where we're gonna go in this thing. Like we're off on an adventure. Bilbo running down the road. I was always wanted to know where we were gonna go, and it really kind of established that. So I'm gonna put a link in chat to this thing, this Project Deus.
Yeah, please do. That's really cool.
Which is right here. So it's sick. Like battle maps, city maps, world maps,
Wow.
maps based upon certain principles. So this is the kind of population size. Okay, that means that you're likely to have this, this, and this. So you
Yep.
could even make it modular if you want. Like I don't want to fill out every house, although you could. Instead, give me this section that's basically a merchant district and with the
This is
following parameters.
incredible.
Right? Like, and they made like 421,000 euros, which is like $8 quadrillion. No, I don't remember exactly what it is in the other, but it's crazy. Like, and so in
Wow.
there they have, and it says it right there. You create worlds with detailed regions and custom cities, which you link to battle maps. So it's literally starting up here and zoomed all the way down to the micro level, which is that's tremendous for this kind of thing because it makes it possible for us to do this. And the commercial license allows you to use aspects like that in games that you are making money off of directly. So, which is really, really cool. They have links to like the city builder and a whole bunch of other things. Anyway, but it just reminded me when you were talking about sort of putting that together, how neat that is. So, but yeah, the takeaway point, folks, is really about the importance of theme, knowing what the themes are in your world, and then being clear with your players at all times. Also, I'll give Dot some credit for this too. You have to be willing to put your ego aside just a little bit, to both stick by your guns and say this is the what I want, but to do so without getting defensive, right? Because if someone goes through something and it's an honest misunderstanding and they're like, look, this thing happened, that is going to occur. You're going to have moments that there's sort of you said this and they said that and people got hurt by that. And that's going to have to be addressed. And you don't have to address it by thinking, I've got to come out and apologize and all that. Or I've got to come out and be super angry and like defensive and righteous about it and self-righteous about it. You can just have a conversation, right? And that's a conversation that allows you, if there's trust on both sides, to work through these problems. So some of this, as we've talked about before, you try to avoid with making session zeros, but even session zeros cannot address all of this, as we've just talked about. So there will be times when you'll need to, as the campaign is going on, have a check-in and basically see how people are doing. And sometimes if something comes up, be willing to say, here's what's going on, and listen without getting upset or angry, and just allow people to have a reasoned adult conversation with each other. And if you're not capable of doing that, or your player is not capable of doing that, it's going to be difficult for you, and you may need to assess that, because you can't have a campaign where someone is perpetually getting hurt, either you or the players. It's going to happen sometimes, and that's why you chat about these things. But it can't be something where you're just fundamentally disconnected from each other all the time. And so again, that's why check-ins and communication matter. So, but anyway, that's cool. I am very interested in the way that you put that together. So yeah, thanks, Todd. So I'm just looking at the maps here. I'm like,
Yeah,
Scum and
right.
Villainy combined, the biomes. Oh man, it's gonna be cool. I dig it.
That'd be great.
All right, well, so let's move ahead to talk a little bit about our product review, which in this particular case is going to be useful because it's about stuff that happened at Gen Con. I want you to talk about Gen Con, but before you do that, I'm going to do mine because mine's going to be a little bit quicker and it doesn't have anything to do with Gen Con. So,
Perfect.
These two books have been sent to me by the amazing people at Cubicle 7 who sponsor Adventures of Middle-earth. They have sent me two books. One of them is the Lonely Mountain Region Guide. And again, I just, first of all, map, just so everybody knows. I cannot express enough how absolute much joy I get in a work that was the most important work of my childhood, The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. How much I love that this game has captured the feel and the impression of walking through that world. I feel like we are absolutely playing something with which Professor Tolkien would be proud. As much as I love the films, and as much as I love the NPR radio versions and all the different ones that are out there, and I've seen them and heard them all, there are things there that I'm sure he would not be happy with. This is not one of those things. I'm pretty confident that he would be very, very much pleased with the way that they've represented it. And I just think it's just so, so cool. The characters that they have in here, as is the case with all their other ones, they have ones on Erebor and many other, Eriador and other areas, Mirkwood. But just some of the things that you have in here, some of it is sort of nostalgic stuff where you actually get to see Bomber like statted out and like, Thorin statted out and people like that. So some of that is just kind of slick. But then other parts of it just really feel rich with the kind of feel of the universe in which you're playing. Even like fellowship undertakings. I just want to give one example of this. So one of the things that makes this work as the fellowship, as a Venture Middle Earth game, is that during the downtime, basically, or the equivalent in Scum and Villainy, it's called a fellowship phase. But a fellowship phase is often just as active as the adventuring phase, because during that time, you do something which is a long extended thing, gathering lore, or trying to get somebody like a patron. My players ended up getting Bjorn as one of their patrons, and things like that. And so these fellowship phases, every time I come across a new one, I just get a big smile on my face. So this one is New Fellowship Phase Undertaking. Study the Stonework of Bainhorn. Companions who spend a fellowship phase in Erebor or Dale can set out to examine the marvelous stonework of Bainhorn, which is a group of dwarves. This might otherwise be a cold, cheerless endeavor were it not for the beauty of the carvings. For the length of the next of the adventuring phase, describing the beauty of Bainhorn gains a hero advantage on their introduction checks in an audience with dwarves. So every part of that I love. They have an encounter with dwarves, right, during the adventuring phase. All they do is describe the beauty of the halls, and it gives them an advantage in that check, which has a mechanical benefit. And the books do this all the time. Gimli talks about the beauty of Moria and the beauty of the Lonely Mountain, the halls under Lonely Mountain, and the sparkling of the gems. And it's gorgeous, and it's part and parcel of what makes this world so incredibly rich. And so they added something in here which does honor to that and also has a mechanical benefit. And it's one of a million type of fellowship phase undertakings that you could do, some of which are not even statted out, and you can sort of talk that over with a lore master. But just the fact that they added stuff like this, I think, is really, really cool. So Lonely Mountain Region Guide was really cool. And then the other one was the Breeland Region Guide, which not only has all those things that I've just described, but also has a adventure in here which takes them from levels 1 to 3 and allows them to hook into many different things. So when my players are done with their part of the adventure, they are right now over near the Lonely Mountain, and they're closing in on the end of Wilderland Adventures. I could have brought them to Mirkwood. I could have brought them back over the Misty Mountains and start dealing with stuff with Elrond and the Shire and stuff to the west of the mountains. But what probably will end up happening is we'll probably end up doing a set of Erebor adventures, which is for higher level parties that will be dealing with stuff in and about the concerns of dwarves, because we have a dwarf who's in the party. They've already had several connections to that. They're over there anyway. So, but people could have gone a totally different direction. They could have started with Mirkwood, gone west, and they could just stay west, and they could never come back to the east again. So I just really think the richness of this world is great. And separately, I just love reading this stuff and just like geeking out at like, oh my God, here's Bjorn. Oh my God, I get to check out this. Here's what Radagast's house looks like. Here's what I love that. And they've done a wonderful job. So again, full disclosure, they do sponsor the game, but still, this stuff is really, really great. It's beautiful art as well. So Breeland Region Guide and Lonely Mountain Region Guide I just got, and they are awesome. So, okay. Now, Gen Con, hit me. Give me some of this cool stuff that you got there.
Before I hit Gen Con, I'm excited to announce that you guys can buy my first ever Adventurers League module.
Oh yeah, that's
that
right.
Dropped since the last time that finally is on the market. Here, I have a link, which is very exciting. I've gotten really positive feedback, except for the one guy that left feedback on DM Skill. Like literally, I've had people personally email me to tell me how great their table thought it was. The one person that's left feedback on the GM Skill was like, "This module sucks."
Oh God.
I was like, "Great,
well,
perfect."
Listen, that's what it's actually for. Thank you for the raid, by the way, Grivix. I appreciate it. Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Beneath Iron Fang Keep. Well, let's be clear here. First of all, the name is that's just...
Yeah. Well, if any of you are old school lore, you'll know that Iron Fang Keep is and you like the Moonsea region, you'll know that Iron Fang Keep is a kind of mysterious location that's like really deep and ancient in the lore. when you have to get permission to write things for AL, like through Wizards, like everything you pitch has to be approved by them.
Moonsea
So
is
when
right.
this is all in the Moonsea region, and when I pitched this idea in that location, because I'm obsessed with Iron Fang, like I've always wanted somebody to, like I've wanted Wizards to write a module. Like nobody knows what goes on in Iron Fang. It's just this incredible like location that sits on top of a freaking waterfall. It was one of the last 13 of the original 13 standing giant fortresses.
Mm-hmm.
It's the last one. And there's like mysterious things that happen in all of these series, but nobody ever gets to go inside of Iron Fang because it's like heavily warded. So when I asked permission, they basically told me, yeah, you can write about it, but you can't go into the main building. So I wrote the story of what's happening in the lower level of Iron Fang Keep, like what's happening beneath it as it sits over top of this waterfall. So yeah, it was really fun. I'm really glad they gave me permission to use the location because that was a huge portion of
So wait, first of all, I should send this along to a good friend Ed Greenwood, friend of the channel, and be like, hey, does this fit Moonsea's did she do honor to your world? So it says it's spread over 3 story episodes that take approximately 2 hours to play, introduced by call to action. So we're talking 6 hours theoretically for the whole thing.
No. So it is a main story takes 2 hours, and then there are 2 1 hour side quests that can go along with it. Like if you complete everything, it takes I think 4 hours. But this is also the final of a 5 volume. So I'm ending a much larger campaign that you could run around this story. So my other friend wrote I think the first one in the series. I can't remember. But it all happens around this piece of jewelry that has been broken into shards, and each volume of this 5 set covers where one of the shards is located. So you can have a larger campaign, or it's a standalone thing. The shard can mean nothing, but they let me use one of my favorite monsters, and they let me use one of my favorite locations in the Moonsea. So
chat, this sounds very much to me like the kind of thing that one could look at, say, for D&D with viewers session. I could see that being the kind of thing that might be fun for us to look at, because I'm always looking for good, essentially one-shots that this could work into.
It takes place on a little river town, so I got to put my portion of South Georgia Swamp Girl in there. And then it takes place in, like I said, the kind of basement of the location. But the big mystery is how do you get in? You have to get into Iron Fang, which everybody. So I could go into the history. I've read so much about it. So basically, what we know about Iron Fang Keep is that it is. Nobody knows how to enter it. It's heavily warded, so you can't go through the front door. And the 2 people within the last few hundred years that have gone into the location, one of them wound up on the other side of the world, mad out of his mind in the desert. The other one became very ill and died promptly. So neither of them were able to really share what their experience was having gone inside of Iron Fang. So I took a theory that is a well-known theory, and then riffed off of it to give some clue as to what might be happening inside of this old keep.
All right. Well, there's a review, confirm order, processing order.
Oh, yay.
And
I also made the maps for it. It's my first published map set, so I made all my maps for it.
Ooh. I am literally live on stream. Yes. Although you can't, I hope none of you can see all these things that I'm putting in here. Well, thanks for all your credit card info, Arv.
Yeah, right. Boop, boop, a-doop.
Okay. And yes, that's me. Yes, you can. Pay. Yes. Thank you. Pay the balance. Right.
Thanks,
that's
gang.
Correct. Thank you. Sending you back to One Bookshelf Incorporated to complete this purchase. All right. Click the links down below to download your titles. Starting. Boop. Save file.
Thanks, Arv.
Yay! Oh, my pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.
Listen, first of all, I'm always happy to support friends anyway. And then when I started reading about it, I'm like, ooh, everything you've said sounds good. You did a wonderful job selling it. All right, there we go. The Jade Curse. Now it says part 5. So did this build into previous?
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
It's APL
yes.
8. So.
Yeah, so it's part of a 5-part. If you wanted to get all 5 of them, that has the Jade Curse or whatever is the overarching story between all 5 of them, but it's like an undercurrent because AL's like, well, they have to be standalone. So you write them as like a standalone module, but they have, in this case, each one of them has a little thing that like ties into the next one.
Okay.
So you can run it as a giant campaign, or you can run it as just a one shot.
That's very, very cool.
Yep.
All right, neat. And
there you go.
Wow, there's some interesting monsters here too. All right. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
very cool. So this may show up next month, chat, for our D&D with viewers. This may show up there.
Cool.
I'm adding it to my adventures list. Okay, cool. Anyway, very neat. Okay, so now that we've done
I can talk about Gen Con.
Now you can talk about Gen Con.
So Gen Con was great. You know, I got to run the Twitch channel for Gen and all that kind of stuff. So I did a lot of production, but my last day, I finally got to the dealer's hall and I wanted to run by a few places, and Renegade Games was one of the locations that I really just wanted to hit. So I ran by, and their marketing person was there, and she recognized me. I was with a few other people, and she hooked me up with like $400 in books and games. Wow. So 2020 is going to be a year of Renegade Games on my channel. I did a whole review and like unboxing of everything that they gave me. That thing's on my YouTube channel too. But I was very excited. So I finally ran Kids on Bikes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I've picked up Teens in Space. That also came with my little set from her. So I haven't run Teens in Space yet, but that's going to be a fun one that's coming. I'm trying to say, where is? Yeah, I have so many books. Oh, they're back here. Okay, yeah. So Kids on Bikes, Teens in Space. So Kids on Bikes is a joy, an absolute joy to play. I really like it. Remember when I talked about Witch Girls and how it used a different die per stat?
Mm-hmm.
This uses the same type system where you assign a die to your stats versus a base dice that adds stat.
Okay.
So that I think is really cool, and it's kid friendly. The one that I ended up getting was the deluxe edition, which I highly encourage you. So if like you like 80s kid movies, if you like it, if you like Stranger Things, you should own this game. But
Tales from the Loop, maybe?
Tales from the Loop, yeah.
Okay.
Same type thing. So the difference is that everybody has a bike and your kids on bikes. But the deluxe edition has prompts for the GM in the back, which are freaking hysterical, and they're brilliant. And they are audience submitted. So these were submitted by people that were like fans of the game. And they're these like 2-page prompts for the GM. I read one the other day called Snow Days at Chanky Cheese. And it was a blast. But there's even one in here, if you don't want to play kids, you want to play adults. Like, I'm going to run this one. It's called Dads on Mowers. And so and it's all about like dads in tube socks with like short shorts riding mowers. And there's an issue in their like little Simsy type suburbia town.
With a tape player Walkman, maybe?
Yeah. Look at their dad. They're like, I mean, I just can't even handle, like, the art's brilliant. It's just, it's very fun. So I highly recommend this one. Teens in Space is just a supplement. You need to have Kids on Bikes for Teens in Space.
And I actually just saw that being played on Hyper RPG also, Kids on Bikes. So it's becoming like, you know, it was funny because it was right after you had talked to me about it. And I'm like,
well, it won the Emmy this year for best family friendly game, I think, or like family oriented game or whatever, because you can play it with kids. Mm-hmm. One of the things I also really appreciate is at the top of each of these adventures, the first thing you see is the content warning. So you could be like, players, this module, if you want to play, includes bullying, drowning, human experimentation, mind control, and mob violence. How do we feel about those things? Mm-hmm. Which I think is a really helpful tool for like, you know, because as I was flipping through, there were some that dealt with like abuse to animals, and I was like, I can't do abuse to animals, so I'm not running that one. Yeah. And it was just a really nice way for like content organization and communication.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. So I got those, which is that's like their big thing right now. Renegade's game's big thing. But I got my hands on a lot of other cool stuff. So first things first. Oh, I should share this. If you're really saucy and you get into it, Kids on Bikes has a GM folder. That's like it's
a Trapper Keeper
like folder for your and it's got like all of the like great like, you know, Tom and Sally like type, like it's so brilliant.
See, you know, Dot, you didn't even grow up in this time, all right? I am having to relive.
I was a 90s kid. I had Trapper Keepers.
I wouldn't. Did you? No. You didn't have the Trapper Keeper with the slick plastic cover that had the Velcro button.
No, I didn't have
that you had to close it, and it had the little. Oh God. Yesterday I was doing writing in Starbucks, and they were just playing. I was like back in high school. Every song is like, I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight, Duran Duran, George Michael, Like a Virgin from Madonna, Red Red Wine. I'm like, what is going on?
I had a Lisa Frank and a Nickelodeon Trapper Keeper.
Oh, okay. Well, Nickelodeon's clutch. That's fine. But if I make the reference, you can't do that on television. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know if I
See?
do.
This is my problem. See? I'm turning 47 on Monday,
I
and
don't
this is
know
what
if I do.
happens. Like, this is...
Wait, no. Well, now you have to tell me. You can't just keep it.
Garlic Tofu knows this. What's up, Garlic? How you doing? You Can't Do That on Television was a show that was on Nickelodeon where one of the big things that would happen is people would use a certain code word and they would get like slimed with this green slime or
Oh
whatever.
yeah,
and,
I remember them getting slimed.
and stuff like that. And actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Alanis Morissette was on one of the shows on Nickelodeon when she was really young, and I can't remember what it actually was, but like,
That.
yeah,
I mean, I remember people getting slimed because they used to slime everybody in Orlando, and you could go sit and watch the live show.
In the live show. Oh, it was that one, Garlic? Wait, was Alistair the one with the dark curly hair, Aridinel? Is that who that was? Oh man. See,
So-
Aridinel, yeah, exactly. All right, I'm with you, Aridinel. Right there with you, man. Right there with you. This is not a good thing. I just want to be clear that this is not. I didn't love the 80s. All right, there are things and stuff.
I was just like,
you
I
don't want
was
to see
born
the
so
glasses
late
I had to
80s
wear.
that I was really a 90s kid. I lived through the 90s.
Okay. Anyway, no, I'm just joking.
So I'm in love. Like, I'm gonna be running it a lot more. It's
Okay.
just a really great, easy game. The character sheet's a single page. It's just like super easy, and they have quick startup rules for your players, like with pre-generated character sheets and stuff that
Mhm.
are quick and dirty, that don't cost anything. It's free. You can go to the Renegade website for those. So then they handed me this one. So for all you zombie folk out there is officially a zombie outbreak game.
Oh, look at
So
that.
Outbreak Undead. They now have, this was the Survivor's Guide, and they finally released like the Game Master Guide. So I got my hands on both. I will say this one is real clunky. There's a lot of stuff that you like, just mechanical stuff. Like, this is the character sheet.
Wow, that's in quite
Like,
a lot of stats.
There's a DNA strand for like if you become infected. It's intense stuff. So just know that that's yeah. But I will say that it does help. Like, it's really cool. They've gone through and they've like, it looks like they've handwritten like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it's got the reference chart of what each section is. So it is a helpful guide. The Survivor Guide. It's just a lot to read. But that being said, it's pretty cool if you want to go. It is a true on survival game. Like, the idea is to just not die, which is why you have the DNA or the like virus bar across the top is like, eventually you're going to become infected, and how long can you hang out?
Is it Cthulhu-esque in that you pretty much are always going to die, or is it that there is a shot at survival maybe? But...
No, there is definitely a shot, but again, it's that same amount of like, how much of a shot do you have in the zombie apocalypse? Like,
Okay,
can we
right.
go back from this? I actually I've only been able to read through the Survivor's Guide. I've actually not had a chance to read through the GM's Guide, which I feel like may answer some of those questions.
Mhm.
Yeah,
it's
because
okay.
it talks
I don't
about the
expect you to
setting.
know all that
Oh yeah,
usually.
so this is what I was looking for. Yeah, so see, it's got these like, it's like they look like handwritten notes from
Oh,
somebody
neat.
that's like survived for the GM,
Yeah,
which is
neat.
cool because it's treated a lot. That's also like VTM, and there's like pages of them of these stories and things. So that one is also pretty cool. This one I'm excited about, and I'm going to give them a huge shout out for this because I want to hug whoever designed this game. So their Renegade is actually a board game company. They were originally. Their very famous North Sea series, which is a Viking based game, has been turned into an RPG. And I'm gonna run it. But what I have to say that I love the most about this book is that there are tons of female Vikings in it. Whoever the artist was definitely female. So I think I'm actually like, in this case, the carpenter is a female.
Nice.
Like, they've just done a really great job of like showing a lot of diversity. Like this, but look at her. Like, she's badass.
Yeah, it's badass.
And like, here's another female. Like, they just got it's very it's just really great to see, I guess. They have one image in here of an all-female army, which actually, God, the artwork's so good. Like, that's a woman. God, so good. I think I'm gonna run an all-female campaign.
Slick.
Yeah, so that's gonna be coming in the new year. I haven't cast it yet. Here it is, an all-female army.
Wow, that's
I
slick.
just think it's the coolest thing. So this was also one I got my hands on. This one's definitely a little bit like simpler, D20 based system, like quick and dirty. So I'm gonna definitely run that one. But the one I am most excited about, the Renegade game that like, I literally, one of the reasons I stopped and the marketing director came over is because I was in awe of this book. Like, I have not been jaw dropped by a book like this in such a long time. So the game is called Overlight. I don't know if anybody's heard of it. The front of the book says a role-playing game of kaleidoscopic journey, and the entire thing is based off color and light. So magic is called chroma, and it takes place in this world where each of the planets are actually shards that float on top of one another, and each shard is based on a color. This is your world, and light passes through the shards, and the farther down you go, the darker it gets.
Wow.
So light is like this really important thing in the game. So this is not your Tolkien fantasy.
Right.
It is a fantasy game, but this is not your Tolkien fantasy. There are no elves, there are no dwarves. You create these people based on the shard that you come off of. So each shard has like a race that lives on it, and a series of chroma that comes from it. The book is extraordinary. Like, look at this little critter. And the art's really beautiful, like little touches like the rainbow down the side.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can see it or not. So this game, this is a chunky book, so I'm still reading through this one, but I will run this game. Like, look at this artwork. Look at that.
That's
how
gorgeous.
beautiful that is. So I was just obsessed with this game. It's really cool, and the way that chroma works, because chroma is like your magic system, right? Think of it like mana, or the energy or power that you draw from to make magics occur. It's like you have to channel it to make chroma happen. And so they give a lot of examples about like the way that it might look chroma, because it's not a casting a spell. And one of the ones that they gave that I thought was really brilliant, I was looking to see if I could find it, and of course I can't, was like, you play a homeless child on this shard planet, and you've been on the streets all day trying to find food or money or anything, and nobody's really helped you out. And at the end of the day, you're on the street and it is so cold. And the only way that you're going to have fire is through that raging hatred that you have for everybody that didn't help you today.
Wow.
And so it's this idea that your chroma has to come from the light and dark balance that you have, the way that color and light work. So it's this really kind of psychedelic kind of, they call it kaleidoscopic, like way that the world like shifts and works based on light and emotions. And I'm just like, I am here for it. I'm so here for it. So just know this is what my 2020 is looking like, because I'm like, oh, so
again,
much.
I talked about this, chat, like theme. It's all about thematic considerations, and like that's pretty slick.
Yeah.
And it also, and on Twitch it'll do well, because you can just set up a thing where you just kind of like color overlay, like everything is just like I want a parade, like it's just color everywhere.
They also gave me, I can't remember. Oh, there they are. Here, they're not over here. They're over here in my pack of giveaway stuff. Let me grab it. They gave me a set of dice too, which are really cool. Hang on.
This section of the broadcast brought to you by Renegade Games. If you want to know more about Renegade
Games, they gave me what's known as the deluxe spirit die, because your spirit is tied to like your color and your virtue based on it. And so each of this is one of every color. These are your spirit die, one of every color, and they're four-sided. So I decided not to open these. I'm going to give these away when we run the game.
Wow.
But, it's just the most beautiful game.
So this was so basically your Gen Con just involved stopping in front of Renegade and
literally she gave me a huge bag. It was so funny because I didn't buy a whole lot. Like I went in strictly for Scum and Villainy. That's what I had purchased. And I picked up a few other Evil Hat things that I wanted, like dice unnecessarily and a pen and a few other things. But and I also picked up the Camarilla book, but I didn't end up buying it because I just worked so damn much that weekend. And so when I just randomly was like, I'm going to go check out Renegade Games 1. I've wanted to play Kids on Bike. I'm going to drop by. And then they had this on display, which is what stopped me. Like I stopped. I was like looking, and she walked up and I got to chatting, and she's like, why did I just hear a bag? I was literally like struggling to carry the bag because it was like all of these books. She gave me a bunch of stuff to give away. What else did she give? Yeah. And for any of you that do free RPG day, they have Overlight has released a few mini modules. So these are like story, like little stories that you can run that are already designed for you. And they gave a whole bunch of those away on free RPG day. So you guys should look out, because that's here's one for Outbreak. Mm-hmm. So give me a bunch of that. And look at this. Look at the DM screen for Overlight. It's so beautiful. I just can't handle myself. Look at that DM screen.
I feel like, that's and so it's interesting because so much of the selling point on it really is kind of the visual impact, and then
it's the aesthetic.
The aesthetic, and then you take the aesthetic and work it out to what the impact.
And it just it spoke to me. Obviously, color is my jam. I love the psychedelic vibe, and so I saw it and was like, I have never related with a world so much of just a visual. I was so here for it. And she was like, yeah, nobody's really played it yet. We've not gotten a lot of screen time for it. And I was like, well, you pass a book over and I will assure you that it's going to get its bright deserved screen time.
That's awesome. You got to make sure that they you got to reach out to them and get them to sponsor you and like get
Well, I
them to
haven't made the
call it
big
out.
announcement yet. Technically, you guys are getting in early that it's going to be a year of Renegade games. 2020 is kicking off with all. I'm just playing like
So
Renegade
okay,
games.
all right,
Yeah, so I will be reaching out to them to be like, just so that you know,
okay.
I'm running all of your stuff in 2020. Why don't you give me some love? So I've got a few other things in my pocket that I've picked up too, but these are the big ones that I really, really, really
Wow,
want.
that is a productive and all centered around one company. It's also, I mean, like I don't because Renegade Games is not that huge a company either. I mean, like it's just, but they've just got a lot of good focus in the
Yeah,
last couple
and
of years and
they
stuff like
use a
that.
lot of different writers, which I
Yeah.
think is really interesting. They don't use the same pool of writers, so it kind of varies, right? Like the people that wrote this one, um, yeah, so like the illustrator, and they also use a lot of different illustrators,
Hmm.
right? So like this illustrator is clearly not the same person, but like still so amazing.
Yeah.
So this is done by the these are the same people I think that designed their board games. And when I say that North Sea has like they have like 3 or 4 board games out, the Viking board games. People love their
Hmm.
board games.
Hmm.
But even this like zombie outbreak, this feels more to me like a VTM book or like a World of Darkness book
Yeah.
with like the way it's laid out and stuff. So they just have they have a great eye for aesthetic, which I think a lot of companies forget is important in a book. It's
Yeah.
super important in a book.
Absolutely, it makes a big difference. The one of the things that really attracted me to the Alligator Alley stuff when I was starting to look, because I actually reached out to them first. I'd been thinking about doing a space opera type of game, and I looked for a couple of them, and there are Stars Without Number, and there's other ones that are out there like that. But when I found the Aspergenesis stuff, I was just absolutely blown away by how professional it all was and just how super. I mean, you would not have been able to believe it was not done by WotC or something similar. And
Right.
you start opening the stuff up and flipping through, and then Rich Lescouflair, also DM's Guild adept, also done a lot of Adventures League stuff. And so it all starts to make sense. But they just did a really good job, and that whole team. And I'm biased because they did Forbidden Library and a bunch of other things,
Right.
so I'm biased. But I just think they did a wonderful job with it. So yeah, the aesthetic definitely makes a difference, especially when, as I think is happening more and more, the aesthetic is drawn into the rest of the world. So the feel of the visual really does become, if it's done correctly, it is of a piece with the kind of game that you're about to play.
Mm-hmm.
And the best book covers do this too, by the way. The best book covers will represent something that is going to fit within the context of the story you're about to read. And when you get a really great cover, you just kind of marvel at how well done it is, especially when you read the book. It just totally fits the cover. So I think the aesthetic is very important, and is becoming increasingly so. And again, reflects, I think, a consciousness of live streaming, which I think has revolutionized tabletop play because people are watching this too. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that means that there is, even if it's still largely done in our imagination, it is mostly theater of the mind, but there is a visual component to it that there did not exist in the same way, even 10, 15 years ago. So I think that's kind of neat. And yeah, and exactly. That's the thing. Now I don't want to talk anything bad about Steve Jackson, who I've been fortunate enough to be in a panel with, but the thing about GURPS is GURPS always felt as generic as it claimed it was. And I
Yep.
don't think that was a strength. Like I remember always just being like, D&D, amazing this, and then I was like, and then there's this thing that looks like some dude like bound it at a Kinko's and brought it in at
Yes.
and I'm like, what? And again, a lot of people swear by GURPS, and I'd be happy to swear by it if I thought that it would have been something which had a visual appeal. Avalon Hill during the 1980s, since we were talking about that, had the exact same problem. And there were a lot of great games that came out of Avalon Hill, a lot of tremendous war games and just all sorts of things, but they did not have the off-the-shelf appeal that something like, for example, Games Workshop did when they produced Talisman and Warlock of Firetop Mountain based on Steve Jackson, the other Steve Jackson's game, and things like that. The visual appeal was huge. The sorcery books that you guys know that I've done on this channel that Inkle did based on the sorcery books written by the other Steve
Mm-hmm.
Jackson, the aesthetic of those, the art is just tremendous, and it really sort of ties it all together. So anyway, aesthetic is awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
And
it's huge.
so
It's just huge.
I dig
Oh,
it.
speaking of aesthetic, okay, so this is me nerding out. So I'm also a little bit of an art nerd, right? So there's an artist that I love. There's a comic series that I love called Rickety Stitch. If you guys haven't checked it out, you should. I love old Rickety. Here, I'll send you a link
I
to it.
think you may have mentioned Rickety Stitch.
I might have mentioned it before. I can't remember. And I love Rickety Stitch. It's this little like story that I dig. It's about a skeleton bard who travels through this world where like it is a high fantasy world. Okay,
because I remember the name and the skeleton bard for sure.
Great. Yeah. Okay, so I was at Gen Con and went by Rickety Stitch's booth because I try to go by and see them every year and just catch up on what they're doing. They are launching an RPG.
Oh.
And so they gave me free access to their test material. So I may also be doing that because what I love about it is in D&D, it's very much like these are good things, these are bad things, right? Like a gelatinous cube is bad. But in the world of Rickety Stitch, like that gelatinous cube is just trying to live his best damn life. You know what I'm saying? Like he's just a gelatinous cube and he may be your next door neighbor. So it adds this like really interesting flair to what is good and what is bad and who you play as like a protagonist in a story. I just really love it. But it's very much a very simple like D12 based system. Another reason I love it, D12 is my favorite die. Nobody ever uses D12. So anyways, I managed to get my hands on it, but I think right now their Patreon's getting updates as it advances, but I think I'm going to play test it for them at some point. So
would you recommend, by the way, because I don't think I asked this before. So my daughter likes graphic novels. I can't imagine. She happens to like a certain Icarus graphic novel. I can't imagine why. But she likes graphic novels. And is this for an 11-year-old closing in on 12? Is Rickety Stitch in that ballpark, or is it irreverent and not really suited for?
No, it's suited. How old again?
She's 11, going to be 12 in January.
She might like it. For me, it's part of the visual of why I like Rickety Stitch, but I think I don't remember it ever being like not, I wouldn't say kid friendly, but teen friendly. It would be teen friendly. I mean,
okay.
I want to think it won a junior like library guild selection award or something.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, it's won some awards for being like family like friendly, and the RPG is very simple. Like the test material they sent me was like 27 pages.
Okay. Interesting.
The whole book. Yeah.
That's neat. I am going to have to I'm going to look into this.
I'm Rickety Stitch and the Gelatinous Goo is what the Patreon is calling it.
Okay, Rickety Stitch.
Rickety Stitch and the Gelatinous Goo. Yeah, I dropped some links in chat.
Okay, cool.
But that was when I wanted to toss out. I looked over and saw they gave me a Rickety Stitch sticker, which made my Gen Con for sure. So that made me happy.
Is it lasers and feeling simple? Aradinel asks.
I don't know if it's that simple. It might.
Lasers and feeling simple is really simple.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's as simple as it gets. I would say it's definitely a step up from that. It's not. If D&D is a 6 on a scale where blades in the I was trying to think of what's the most mechanical. 40K is like high up on the scale. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is somewhere at like a 3 or 4.
Yeah,
it's meant for kids, or it's meant for like a family-friendly environment. It's easy to build, pretty quick to understand.
Some of Star Wars is a little high intensity.
Yeah, also. Star Wars is another one that's high intense. Yeah.
Half a page, really, in some illustrations. Yeah, basically, Aradinel. All right, cool. Well, that's so. And actually, since you asked these, since people started to ask questions, this is a good way to, unless there are more Renegade games / Rickety Stitch.
That is literally that is as much as I can possibly tell you guys about. I think in this set, I think I got them all. I hope I remembered them all, but yeah, those were the big ones. Yeah, I got them all. And then I simply bought my hard copy.
Of that. Yeah,
of Scum
and Villainy. Look at it.
Of Scum and Villainy, yeah. So there
Love every part of it. Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, and then since we're talking on D&D, rep some vampire. Well, yeah, I imagine if she got sponsored for Vampire the Masquerade, I'm sure she could. I think Dot could be like, yeah, I guess I could go along with that. I'm just guessing that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I don't think I'm not already planning. I can tell you guys about my Wanted Vampire the Masquerade game. It's probably not what you expect, but I'm very excited about it.
VTM quality. All right, then we're gonna see how that happens. So, Dot's backdrop looks like she rolled the Renegade people on the way out the door and grabbed all she could grab into her car. just a forearm shiver to the bag. They just run out.
Be like trying to lug 35 pounds of books. Oh, man,
I haven't seen Dot
funny.
for a while. Yeah, she's on the run. She's got to come through Canada to get down here.
You got any Renegade games?
Renegade. But it would fit that you stole from Renegade. Let me just say it would actually fit that description. All right, let's take some questions before we wrap up here, because we had a few that were up there. I'm going to take one at the very beginning only because Coven Guy asked it at the very beginning, and I'm pumped up about answering it because he said,
by all means,
it is. So just quick note before I do this. So this is a chance for you folks to ask us questions. Aman Doctor, I think we may have responded to your question already, but please ask it again if we haven't. You simply ask the question by just doing in all capital letters question, and then whatever the question is for either Dot or myself about D&D. If you're having issues with a particular session, or you don't know how to start a particular game, or you're having a particular, I'm not sure about an aspect of world building, now is the time to, or anything we've talked about tonight, now is the time to throw it our way. So Coven asks the question. He says, if the Tolkien estate were to give you his notes and ask you to write an original novel or a series of short stories in the next age, would you be willing to accept, or would it be too daunting a task? It would be too daunting a task, and I would still accept it 1,000,000 times and twice on Sundays. I would absolutely find it the honor of my life to write stories within the Tolkien mythos, and I would be nervous as all hell, but I would absolutely do it, because I learned a long time ago that even if you are nervous to do something, if you feel like you have the qualifications to, and I teach it, and I write it, and I study it, and a very dear friend of mine is a lead compositor for Weta, who has done stuff on The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Yes, I think I am, and I run the official Adventures of Middle-earth campaign on Twitch. Yes, I would be willing to do it, and I would absolutely love to do it. And I would say also that Brandon Sanderson often talked about when he was given the opportunity and was literally called by Robert Jordan's widow, and she said, "Would you be willing to finish The Wheel of Time?" And he was like, I was terrified, and I immediately said yes. That would be essentially what it is for me. I would be terrified. I would in no way ever claim that my work was going to measure up to Professor Tolkien's, but I would put every ounce of effort and energy I could into it, and it would be a tremendous honor. So if anyone ever happens to check this out from the Tolkien estate, and if Christopher Tolkien, his son, is watching or whatever, it would be an incredible honor, because honestly, I would not be having this discussion with Dot, and in fact, my life would be vastly different were it not for the hugely beneficial effect of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. It really is what got me involved in reading in the first place, and has vastly altered my life in all positive ways. So yes, it would be a great honor. Sorry for the extensive answer, but I saw that and I'm like, I cannot wait to answer that question in the affirmative.
Yeah, I was about to say, has there ever been a more perfect question for you?
Yeah, I was just like,
the answer.
Oh my God. Okay. All right, let's go down and get to these other ones. Question: who's cooler, Arv or Dot? Really? Answer. I mean, listen, it depends. Are we talking coolness of color? Because at the moment, like you were talking about the color, I would point out that I have the deep red shirt of the wizard hitting the fireball. You have the red hair going on, and you have just spent all this time talking about this color RPG. So I would say that both of us are repping colors today. And so I think in terms of who has the cooler tone of color, that's how I would phrase that unfortunate question. I can't imagine. Okay, question for Dot. How intimidating would it be if you were contacted by Ed Greenwood to develop a boxed set for Iron Fang Keep, or would it be more exciting than intimidating?
Oh, I mean, it would be intimidating. There's no doubt about it, but I'd be so damn excited. Like, I already know what I think's going on in Iron Fang. So if people's like, do you have ideas? I'd be like, let me tell you, I have so many ideas. I have so many ideas, in fact, that, like, honestly, the single module I wrote could have been the actual, like, it could have been a giant campaign where you get locked inside of Iron Fang. So without, like, ruining too much, there's a cult of mages that have been here for like centuries, and have been doing something and nobody knows what. Like, there is knowledge in some, like, campaigns. You can see, like, odd lights coming from the place. Nobody really knows what's going on. You see deliveries being made, like, and dropped off, and then the goods disappear, but nobody really knows who gets them or why. The idea that people are losing their minds, and being found, in deserts on the other side of maps, after having entered the place. Like, there's 1,000 things it could be. And, like, I have all my theories. I have so many theories.
All the theories.
So the answer would be, I would eat that up. I would eat that up.
Yeah, that's well, it would be really cool. Also, I would, if that happened, I would say that WotC was, and I like WotC, but they would be continuing to move in a direction if they allowed Ed Greenwood to actually start doing that on his own, because Ed obviously writes within them, but that's currently owned by WotC. But developing a boxed set and having him go out for that would be the case. But if he ever asks me and he's like, "Who should do this?" I'll be like, "Let me tell you."
Like, yeah,
'Cause
let me tell you who loves Iron Fang Keep.
I will tell you
If you
exactly
guys,
who
if you
does it.
haven't seen it, it's one of the most interesting buildings I've ever seen. Like, it was the physical building and location that really inspired me. Let me see. There's a beautiful picture of it. There's two that I think are probably the most famous, and I'll send them to you guys.
Okay.
But it sits on the edge of a giant waterfall. It's this keep that is in the absolute most like ideal location. Like, you can't get to it, which makes it like a perfect for like stronghold. The second one's the one that I really love. I think the art on it is just baller. Look at that. And the scale is kind of weird, like looking at it, but that's a giant fortress. That it's original. That's not human-sized doors. That's giant-sized doors. So that gives you also perspective of how big it is over that giant waterfall. That's like a Niagara Falls-sized waterfall.
Yeah, that's slick. Yep, that's cool. Yeah, it's interesting. That I think there were parts of, for me, there were two things that always kind of grabbed me in this way. One was something about the spine of the world. I think it's the same reason that I like Skyrim. There's something about that kind of Nordic flavor that I really liked about it. But the other one is Waterdeep. And the reason basically is that I've always found the concept of this place that has all of this intrigue and kind of, it feels very much like Lankmar to me. And
Yes.
I just kind of dig the sort of feel of it. And so one of the geniuses of Ed's work is the fact that he created a world in which so many people could find something like that to grab onto, because there are people who would be all about Neverwinter and people who would all be all about Fae and the Red Wizards, and there's so many aspects of that that people would be interested to look at. So anyway, Iron Fan Keep, yeah. So see, similar answer to what I just said for Tolkien. She would be honored and would straight up do it, and she'd kill it. That's
that would be the hope. Yeah, or yeah.
She would kill it, no question. She would, and I mean kill it. Sorry, let me rephrase. Not kill it like destroy it. I mean kill it in a good way. Like, it would be amazing. It would be great. Let's see. So, question Ammon Doctor asks both. What are your thoughts on having two groups, one DM with their team, and have them have a sort of a Captain America Civil War battle in the middle of a campaign? Oh, so you mean like Dot doing one and me doing the other group, and then we like Captain America battle it out in the middle of a campaign? I mean,
interesting.
The idea of having sort of the Marvel universe, like I've run, at the moment I'm doing Storm King's Thunder in one of my campaigns, and it's set after Tyranny of Dragons, which I've already run and completed. So one of the players happens to be a crossover player. Not the character's not a crossover, but he played in the original. So he's been having fun because I throw in a couple of little Easter eggs from, like basically things they've discovered 10 years later after the situation with the dragons was handled or whatever. So it's neat to have those worlds. I love, world stuff where there is sort of interweaving and connection. I think it gets dangerous when, as I think sometimes is a problem with Marvel, they get so in love with the drops and the references and the interweavings that it becomes, you're not really telling your own story, you're just waiting for the next reference. It's kind of my problem I have with Ready Player One, which I think is basically just a whole ton of 80s references. And,
see, I think the book's brilliant. I thought the movie was garbage. Like, there are the three keys. They're hanging on my wall. I had them tattooed on my body. I had them tattooed on my body. Like, I love Ready Player One as a book, but I thought the movie was
not so much.
What movie? What movie is? Yeah,
the movie. Okay, right. It's like the Last Airbender, the Shalmayan.
Yeah, Avatar. Yeah, it just doesn't exist. Didn't exist. Did not happen.
So I mean, I don't know what Dot thinks. I'm if we knew about something like that ahead of time. And we could talk about whether we wanted to A, make it a surprise, or B, if we told our players that this was going to happen at some point. I think that would be neat. I mean, especially if there was sort of a shared world that people were both as a part of and you could kind of interweave it that way. I'm not opposed to the idea, but you would definitely need to have a sense of either the players really trust you and so they'll be cool with it when it happens, or we just let them know up front, and then figuring out how to work it all together. But I'm not opposed to it.
I think those things seem like crossovers. It puts a lot on your two GMs too, because they have to work together to build a world. Right. So everything that one group does now affects another group and vice versa, which I think is a really interesting mechanism. My first question though would be why? why does this story that these two GMs are trying to tell with these players require that kind of crossover?
Right.
Why?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the themes that we're playing on? Is it varying like value sets or views of the world that they're going to conflict on? It's hard to pigeonhole and plan your players and these other players to go against one another. So it's going to have to be a much larger thing. Are they coming from different sects, two different sides of the mountain? What is the thing, and why does it need to be told that way?
Right. Yep. Well
Would
said.
always be my yeah.
Yep, I agree with all of that. And I would say, one of the things is if you've got a world that's big enough, for example, everyone knows that I'm geeking out about Eberron, which I don't know how I'm going to find room to fit in another campaign, but I'm going to have to try because I adore Eberron. And so when Eberron comes out, I mean, having something where you have something taking place in Sharn, and then you have something else which is taking place far north of that in the Mournlands or something, the idea of having different groups from different areas that eventually come together because you're basically playing in the world and everyone is playing in the world with multiple stories, that I think could be interesting. And I've often thought about the idea of having basically, I thought about it as being a little larger actually, having 4 different groups with 4 DMs in one enormous world that might be able to cross over. And one of the things to think about is it's possible that you would not set it up as a guarantee, like we're going to get together on May the whatever and there'll be a battle, but rather, my group is heading in this direction, and then you're like, oh, my group is going to be near there too, and then you chat, are they going to intersect? Are they going to interact with each other at that point? So I think that's possible. I also thought, and I talked with someone about this a while ago, about doing the same world at different historical periods. So it's almost as if the people who are playing later on will find little Easter eggs that were left behind by other groups that had done stuff.
Okay, interesting. It's more of a historical game.
Yeah. But I mean, in there, it's basically running along parallel tracks. You're not likely, unless there's some time travel mechanic for them to meet each other. But I think, that would be interesting as well. Yeah, exactly. The Infinity Beyond crew escaped Strahd right into the vampire universe. No, someone would have a fit, especially Rob. Poor Rob would just be like, good God, what is the deal with that? But anyway, but yeah, it's certainly not something we'd be opposed to, but I agree entirely with Dot. The question really would be, why do you need it to be done in this way? And there may be the answer where some of them are like that. There are some smaller, intimate places where that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, kids on bikes or Tales from the Loop or the Warren is not likely to need multiple groups that all sort of meet up at one point, because there's, you could just have them together in a single group then. Like, there's not going to be that many extra people that are playing it. But if you're talking about something which has this very large scope world, and that they meet each other, like I could imagine a world using that, the color-based game you talked about before, Dot, where you've got an adventure taking place on one of those shards and an adventure taking place on another one of those shards. And at some point that could actually end up meeting at one of the other sort of collective shards. I could see something like that maybe. But you wouldn't want to force it, and it would depend on how it's talked about. So, anyway, but I mean, it's not.
Oh yeah. Like Vampire the Masquerade is one of those giant worlds, right? Like a Sabbat city conflicting with a Camarilla city. That would be a great way to set up conflict. And, maybe you have a third Anarch. Like that's a absolutely easy setup there, and would make sense because their outcomes are intertwined. The Sabbat, the Anarchs, and the Camarilla all have to worry about one another. So it automatically sets you up for that conflict. D&D doesn't necessarily always do that. So maybe it really has to do with the world, or the setting.
Yeah, but it would be interesting to sort of see that all sort of go down. It's not out of the realm possibility as something we could think about down the line. Okay, I'll say this comment, and then while I'm answering this comment from Em and Doctor, have a chance for like one more question, folks, and then we're going to wrap up here and get everyone on out of here. I will stay on doing some Zelda, but I will let poor Dot has had a long day go. I am planning a huge Dungeons & Dragons campaign where I'm splitting the DMing with another person, and we are thinking of maybe implementing a homebrew system, or if there is a big enough disagreement, we might have to do a sort of battle. Well, that could be kind of funny and interesting, as long as you're very clear that you're DMing with another person and therefore you know what's going on. What I think is dangerous is to have a situation where you as the DM take your group and the other DM takes their group, and the feeling is almost like you're setting up a battle between the two of them. It's a little dangerous because unless everyone is very much lighthearted with everyone and it's all cool and whatever's clever, that's fine. But if it's not like that, and if the players are even vaguely competitive, then some DM is going to have to referee it, and it's going to be awfully hard to decide. And like, what are the consequences? Is this one where it's just like an alternate comic universe thing where like Spider-Man battles this guy and in this alternate universe he dies, but not in the actual world? Because otherwise, if your player defeats a player and actually kills them in a player in the other world, in the other game, does that player then have to accept that and draw a new character up? Is he happy with doing that? Is that going to lead to tension? So, it's almost like getting interplay to party conflict, which I think inter-party conflict can be okay. Inter-party combat is very, very risky, except with certain groups. And so this could devolve into that if you're not careful. So
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting idea, but you got to be careful about
Yeah,
the
you
way
walk
it's
a fine line.
constructed.
I mean, again, I think it's this setting, right? Like our system. Dungeon World is actually set up in the character building process for you to have important and sometimes conflicting relationships with the people
Sure.
at the table. It sets up for that, where
Sure.
D&D automatically assumes everybody's working together.
Right.
It just does. That's the way it's set up. I actually played Dungeon World for the first time at Gen Con this year and quite enjoyed it. I think it's a pretty brilliant system. It's a quick start system.
Yeah, my co-host Mike on Speculate loves Dungeon World also.
It's great.
So something like that, is certainly possible to do. But as you say, there are some cases where that wouldn't work out. In the Adventures of Middle Earth, they make it very clear that like you are on the side of good. Your version of good, how you deploy the good, the flaws and so
Right.
forth. But none of the mechanics of shadow or corruption or any of that works if it's like, I am a dark, shadowy, chaotic neutral figure who steals things from it. And it doesn't, it's just not the setting. So it just depends on the world that you're using. But I think it's possible to do stuff as long as people know about it ahead of time. I would just be careful not to set up something where, because remember, it's not just going to be the mechanics. It will also be the dungeon masters making, or the lore masters or game masters making decisions. And so from the player's point of view, it's not just I am being a neutral referee for NPCs. Suddenly it's Bob's character survived and Susan's didn't. And if Susan gets pissed off about that and is like, well, you've always liked Bob, then that runs into a problem. And so you just need to be a little bit careful about how it gets set up. But I mean, in general terms, yeah, I think it's interesting. And I definitely like the idea. I very much like the idea of creating a world, a broad world in which many things are happening at once. That absolutely gives the sense of life to the world, and not just that everything around you is in black and white and faded and you're the only technicolor part of the world, right? You have to feel that everything you looked at in the world would be as vibrant and lively. And so this certainly would help do something like that. You just have to be careful you deploy it, basically. So, all right. Well, I think those were some good questions, though, folks. Thank you. But I think we are going to wrap up because we are at that time. But before we do that, I will ask Dot whether or not there is anything in particular that you want chat to be aware of from you, that you want them to be looking at from you, that doesn't involve this channel, on your own channel, etc. When's the next big session of games and stuff?
Well, I told you guys about what's coming, so just be on the lookout for those here in the next few months. Things for me right now, you can check out Witch Girl Adventures, the second season, and will probably be the last season for a while. Okay. So we're closing that out. Scum and Villainy is running on Wednesdays. You can check me out on, if you like Cypher System, I'm in like a pulpy Cthulhu style 1920s horror game. Over on Unmade Gaming's channel on Thursdays. VTM just kicked back up literally today. I had the premiere of the second season today before this chat. So Saturdays, you can check me out there. But I am hoping, if I can get myself together, to run either a Halloween or kind of holiday themed VTM campaign, which I'm pretty stoked about. It's called What We Do in the Camarilla. So for all you What We Do in the Shadows fans, I'm basically running VTM set in like a parodied mockumentary style world. So the idea is that a bunch of Primogen have had to leave the city because it's being taken over by Sabbat, and to keep them safe, the council has decided to put them in a tiny farming community in South Dakota.
It's
so
like vampire protection program. Is basically
yeah, if anybody's, it's basically What We Do in the Shadows, but I'm running it out of VTM, so it's called What We Do in the Camarilla. I would play, yeah, it's ridiculous. So I've written special rules for it too, where like you can break and talk directly to the audience, just like they do in the mockumentary. VTM is, What We Do in the Shadows is built off of always having the like servant character. And the servant character is played by the GM, and they can order the familiar like around, the ghoul or whatever around, and So anyways, it's coming. It's going to be my little like 4-part comedy blurb to VTM, and trying to take it. Everybody takes it far too seriously. And then what else is coming? I feel like there was one more thing. I can't remember what it was. Oh, as of tomorrow morning, I become the GM for the North by Northwest podcast. I will be closing out our next 2 volumes. So moving forward, you can check, if you've been listening to North by Northwest, you'll expect me to take over the GMing seat. So that's coming. I'm running the next 2 volumes until we like close this little story out.
Have you GM'd for them before? You've just been in rotation as a player, not as a GM yet?
Yeah. So we rotate GMs. It's a 5-volume story. Okay. We're in the 3rd volume. Every volume has had a different GM. I've played the same character in the first 3 volumes. So it was like Jason, David, Tiffany, and then I'm taking over GM the last 2. So that's kind of the way our podcast works. We have rotating GMs that tell a story in like a larger overarching story.
So you're up on the rotation.
I'm up on the rotation. So it's my turn. So I actually got to go finish writing my notes because that starts up tomorrow morning. So yeah, come check that out. That'll be exciting. And that releases on Wednesday. So
awesome. No rest for the weary.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No rest.
But it was always a great pleasure to have Dot with us. You should definitely check that stuff out. And on my channel with her, you will see her next on Tuesday evening for the Arvocalis as we return to Apollo Justice Ace Attorney, which is a very deeply serious, heavy psychological look at the justice system. Really, it really
makes me want to go back to law school.
Yeah, really. It's very realpolitik. but law school only if it was like that, right? Only if it was just
only if it was actually like that. And
hold it. Yeah.
Does great hair come with going to law school in anime world? It has to.
I assume it must.
Ridiculous hair is part of a curriculum somewhere.
It really is. That and slamming your fist down on desks and stuff.
Or the point.
Yeah. And evidence that like perjury that just happens constantly. And they're like, okay, don't perjure this time. Make sure you don't ever perjure again.
No more perjure. Yeah.
Stop.
Or you guys can come watch Witch Girls and then follow me over to that Tuesday night.
Oh, right.
I'm going to be hopping from one straight to another. Yeah.
That's right. So it'll be a good, chill, very fun stream, but it'll be a good time. Dot, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. You folks should follow her on all the things. And again, go get that, the Below Iron Fang Keep. Yes.
Yes.
You should get Below Iron Fang Keep from the DM's Guild, as I just did. And then check it out because I may even run this next month. We'll see, for D&D with viewers. So, you will have a chance to see it directly, but,
everybody give it a 5-star, even if you hate it, just help me out. It's my first one. Just give it a 5-star.
Just come on, give you a break.
Just the guy that posted nasty stuff, like let's just smother him in love.
There you go. And stars. Many stars.
Well, we're gonna smother him in gold stars.
Smother him in 5 stars. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much, Dot. Chat, can we get some love for Dot? And I will see you in a few days, Dot.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. And all right, so that is going to do it for Masters of the Dungeon, episode 21, but it is not going to do it for me, because we've got other stuff going on. So you may fear not if you're like, wait, you're done already? I'm not done already, because we got some Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD that is going to be happening in just a second. So give me a second here whilst I shift over to, there we go. Well, I shift over to that. Lovely. But I want to thank everyone. First, I'm just going to put a little break in the video here. So I want to thank everyone who came to watch Masters of the Dungeon, episode 21. I hope you'll stick around for Legend of Zelda, Wind Waker HD. But if not, thank you all for being here. You know how to follow all the things. Please let us know. Leave reviews and positive comments. Sub to the YouTube channel and all that good stuff. And thank you all. And I will see all of you lovely people very, very soon.